This story dates back to the late 90s. I was 15 at the time, living in Bournemouth. In the UK with my family, my parents purchased a Victorian 9-bedroom hotel. And we moved into the hotel owner's accommodation. My parents had their room on the ground floor, and my brother and I had a room each in the basement. The hotel was a nice place. It had a happy feel to it, except in certain areas. There was one room, room 7, on the top floor that had a strange vibe when inside it. Whilst cleaning this room, there was a closeness, as if all the air around was closing in on you, and a ring in your ears that only really became apparent when you left the room itself. I always kept the door open when I had to work on this room, and was happy when I got to leave. We will come back to this room later. Within the first few months living at the hotel, it was apparent to the whole family that things were happening that could not be explained by everyday logic. The large old doors around the hotel were heavy and had been fitted with auto closers for fire safety reasons. This made it generally difficult to open them at times, particularly when carrying trays and hotel supplies. However, often we would be walking through parts of the hotel and a door would swing open. We would expect someone to walk out of the connecting room, but there would be no one there. Another occurrence experienced by my entire family at some point or another was the feeling of being hit by a sudden gust of wind, even when in a room with all the doors and windows closed. We're not talking about a little breeze. This was like someone held a large rotary fan up to our face and put it on maximum power. Then after the wind stopped, there would be a strong smell of a gingery aftershave. The first major incident we had involved room 7. A couple and their 10-year-old daughter were staying in the room. After dinner, the parents went to the bar for some drinks, but the daughter was bored and wanted to go watch TV in their room, so she did. All was fine until another guest entered the bar area and asked if anyone was staying in room 7, and they could hear someone screaming in that room. My parents and the girl's parents ran upstairs, and they went into the room and found the daughter sitting up in bed in floods of tears. When asked what was wrong, she said she had fallen asleep and then woke up to see a man standing in the room. My parents asked what the man looked like, thinking it was one of the other guests in the hotel, but the description she gave was of a tall man wearing a top hat, and that he had hair down the sides of his face, but not a beard. She effectively described a Victorian man with sideburns. Her parents asked where he went, but she didn't know. When she woke up, he told her to stay in bed and go back to sleep. That is when she started screaming, and when she looked back up, he was gone. They searched the hotel, but no one was found, and none of the guests came close to matching that description. They put it down to her bad dream, but my family was sure there was more to it than that. Not that we ever talked to the guests about the supernatural occurrences. We figured it would cause more issues if people actively knew. It was a few months before the next sighting. The ground floor layout of the hotel was quite basic. There was a main lobby area, and off from that were the different rooms: lounge, dining room, kitchen, etc. The bar was part of an old extension, only accessible through the dining room. This meant that if you were sat in a certain position in the bar, you could see directly through the dining room and into the main lobby and stairs area. The guest was sat having a drink in that exact spot. When she turned to my mom standing behind the bar and excitedly said, "Oh, you have a wedding party in?" My mom was confused and asked what the guest was referring to. The guest said that a man wearing a full top hat and tails had just walked down the stairs. My mom moved around beside the bar and looked out the window towards the entrance of the hotel, at which point the guest said he didn't go that way. He went down to the right side of the stairs. What the guest didn't know was that the right side of the stairs led to our private quarters. My mom and Dad went to check, but there was no one there, and although there were ways out of the building, they were locked and bolted from the inside, so no one could have exited through them without it showing. Another common occurrence in the hotel would be the sound of running. When on the ground floor, you would hear running upstairs. This was not surprising. When the hotel had guests in an old Victorian hotel, every sound was heard and magnified, but over the Christmas break we would shut the upper floors of the hotel and just have family time, but the running around would still continue. It was so loud at one point that we were sure someone had broken in. My brother, Dad, and I even went upstairs, clutching kitchen knees for safety, but after unlocking and checking the rooms, no one was up there. A guest started staying long-term at the hotel. I don't recall what his job was, but he had business some of the year in Bournemouth, and certain other days he had to travel to London. On London days, he would need to be out of the hotel by 5 a.m. My Mom would leave him out at continental breakfast. He would help himself to it and would be gone before we woke up. Returning later in the evening, one day when returning from London, he was chatting to my parents, and he said something strange had happened when he left the hotel that morning. He had come out of his room as usual and was surprised to see a boy stood on the half landing leading up to the top floor of the hotel. The man was not used to seeing someone else up at 4:30 a.m., but being polite, he said good morning to the boy. He said the boy did not say anything. Instead, he just turned and slowly walked up to the top floor. The man thought it was strange, but carried on with his normal morning routine. My parents were puzzled by this and asked him what the boy had looked like. He said he was around 8 to 9 years old, but could not recall what the boy was wearing. The reason my parents were confused was because at the time we had no children staying in the hotel. Many months later, whilst serving breakfast, a guest came into the dining room and quite loudly asked my mom, "Is this hotel haunted?" All the other guests stopped eating, intrigued by the question, and even more so by what the answer would be. My mom played it cool, simply saying, "Why do you ask?" The lady implied that she'd woken up in the night and there was a boy stood in her room. She said hello to the boy and he vanished. My mom acted surprised and said it was the first she'd heard of anything like that. Again, playing it down in front of all the other listening ears. The final incident involved me. I had been saving my money up to buy a watch. I had finally managed to get enough money together, and I had made my way to town to pick up the watch. It was my first ever expensive purchase. When it was time to go to bed, I took the watch off and went to put it on the bedside table. However, in each room there were internal phones next to the bed. This was in case my parents needed our help or guests were checking in, so we could be called to assist. The bedside table in my room was so small the phone took up all the space. For that reason, I decided to lay the watch over the receiver of the phone and hope no one called me in the night. My bed was one of those large metal bunk beds. It had a single bed at the top and a sofa bed below that folded out into a small double. I slept on the bottom, partly because it was a double, but realistically because the ceiling was so low you could not physically sleep up there. Anyway, I remember being woken up in the night to the loudest clanging metal sound as my whole bed shook. It felt and sounded as though someone had taken a run and jump and landed on the metal ladder of the bed. I was facing the wall at the time and remember the utter fear I felt. I would say it's the only time in my life I've ever been frozen in fear. No part of me would move. I just lay there too scared to turn over and see what had caused the entire bed to shake. I'm not sure I would have been able to call for my brother, but he was away at PGL summer camp, so he couldn't have helped me. Anyway, I lay there for hours just staring at that wall. Finally, the light shone down the basement window and filled my room. I plucked up the courage to turn and look, and thankfully there was nothing there. I sat up in bed, and the first thing I noticed was that the watch was gone from on top of the phone. I searched around on the floor, thinking maybe it had slid off. Then I thought about the noise my bed had made, as if someone had jumped on it. Slowly peering up to the top bed, there in the middle of the mattress was my watch. I guess the little boy had wanted to play with it. My mom went on to research the local history of the hotel. She was able to find out that a doctor had lived there when it was first built as a house, and during the time there a young boy had died from an illness, but I can't remember the exact details of how we owned the hotel for many years before selling it. It was later converted into flats, and I often wonder if they still have any music occurrences. This took place in Colorado. This weed farm itself was way off the beaten path, with which was perfect for growing a crop people like to steal, and made it interesting for the only security guard there at night. It was apparently used to grow beans throughout the 1900s before some bright-eyed entrepreneurs bought it to get a foot in the cannabis business. It's completely surrounded by woods on all sides. Upon entering the complex, you're met with several old farmhouses. Only one was used for offices, while the other two were just storage. This was called the admin area and is on the north end of the property. To the east, west, and south you have 3 growing fields, all approximately 100 acres. Just past the admin area you had 7 greenhouses encompassed by a fence and a large garage attached to it that was used to house greenhouse supplies. Across the lot from that, another garage for farming equipment. So a very large area for one lone security guard. Now, this was a BR new contract, so I had no one to show me around and was basically tasked with creating security procedure for the other guards to follow. To that end, I was working 7 days a week 4 p.m. to 6 a.m. until I had everything ironed out. My first day, I do a walkthrough of the place with my boss. And the farm owner then was left on my own to figure it out. Thankfully I did have a decent little office in the admin building, and they even had an 8-channel security system set up. So weeks go by, and nothing weird has happened, not even an off feeling. If anything, it was beyond peaceful. I figured out a good security routine and made a policy out of it for new guards to follow. After that, life was easy. I do my checks, read fanfic, watch YouTube, glance at cameras, repeat. I was doing just that at about 2 a.m. when I see a black mass jump over the greenhouse fence. I bolt up, lock my office, and run down there, weapon drawn. Now that may seem like a dramatic response, but I should be the only person for literally miles around. The main road is the only way in by vehicle, and it's gated, plus the gate is right next to my office, so I would have seen or heard someone approach by vehicle and foot traffic at that hour and in that location. Well, it's probably not the mailman. I get to the greenhouse area gate and quietly let myself in. I start checking greenhouses one by one. After about 20 minutes, I find absolutely nothing. I find the camera in question and looked around the area, but I found nothing out of place. I end up doing my entire security check early just to be sure. I then head back to my office. I plan to review the footage because the fence is 8 feet tall with an additional foot of barbed wire across the top. That in itself freaks me out because I've been outside for over an hour before I realized the only thing that can clear that jump is a mountain lion. So I hustled back to my office, but my monitor is black, no signal. Found the hard drive in the brand new DVR is fried at this point. It's weird, but not necessarily paranormal. A few days go by, we get the hard drive replaced, and all is well. It's probably around midnight, and I'm doing my checks by the backside of the greenhouse area when out of nowhere a blood-curdling scream, and it's damn close. My body goes cold. This very well could be the big cat I suspected from a few nights earlier. I find the nearest gate and let myself into the greenhouse area. Better in there than out in the open, but then I hear crying, unmistakably female, diaphragm shaking, snot slinging, weeping. That's not a cat. I almost wish it was, but I have to look. That's my job now. Behind the greenhouse area there's a dirt road in front of the center field that circles all the way around it. This road connects to the perimeter roads for the two side fields. Think of 3 big circles arranged in the loose shape of a triangle with the greenhouses in the middle. Well, this crying sounded like it was coming from that center road. I start to approach very slowly and can still hear it as clear as day. It's getting louder and louder the closer I get. It's almost nightmarish until it just stops. So I stopped. I stayed there completely still for quite a long time, but there was nothing. People don't just stop sobbing. There's at least sniffling, maybe that hiccuping thing when you try to catch your breath, but it just went from wailing to nothing in one beat. After that, I always felt uncomfortable toward that back field. I heard the screams several more times after that, always around midnight and always from that same area, but I never went to investigate after my initial experience. By this time, harvest has come and gone, and the fields are bare. I'm still needed, however, because they used the greenhouses throughout the winter. As the seasons change, so did my responsibilities. Rather than patrolling the fields, my focus was the greenhouses. Not just for theft, but also ensuring that the heaters continue to work throughout the cold nights. To this end, I took to parking my Jeep next to the greenhouse area so I didn't have to make the long trek through the snow from the security office to the greenhouses. I could see everything I needed to from my driver's seat, and my Jeep heater was infinitely better than the little space heater in my office. I had a routine: start the Jeep, get it nice and hot, then turn it off. I kept my windows cracked because security work at night is 50% listening for weird, I didn't have to listen hard. A loud bang immediately removed any drowsiness I may have had. Something just hit my vehicle. I don't get out immediately. I took a good look around, listen for footsteps, and check my mirrors frantically, but there's nothing. Then it happens again, bang on the roof of my Jeep, and dirt tumbles down my windshield. Someone's throwing dirt clumps at me. I call my supervisor and explain what's going on, and she says she's on her way and will be there in about half an hour, as she's working at another farm not too far away. I reach to the passenger seat and grab my spotlight, the big kind of spotlight, 1,000 lumens, and allows me to see the back of every field, the kind of spotlight that will land you in jail if you shine it at a plane. I hop out of my Jeep and climb On the roof, it had to have come from the back field. I began panning back and forth with my handheld beam of daylight. I don't immediately see anyone, so I start with verbal commands. Come out, you're trespassing, announce yourself, I'm authorized to use lethal force, yada yada. There's no response. I stay posted up until my supervisor arrives. We decide to walk the perimeter of all 3 fields and found absolutely nothing. By this time it's almost 3 a.m. and we were back at my Jeep talking and smoking. Then a whistle, kind of like that playful 2-tone whistle that says, I'm over here, my supervisor just gave me this look. Like, seriously? I told her that's the kind of thing I deal with at this place. She stuck around for the rest of the shift, but nothing else happened. It stayed quiet until Christmas Day, when I picked up a shift for that sweet holiday pay. I opted to stay in the office for the sake of my Jeep. That's when the music started. Long flowing classical music that you might hear playing quietly at a fancy party. I listened, then stood up and listened some more. I walked to the doorway of the security office and stopped to listen again. It's still there. I stepped out and it stops. I pause to a dead silence. I step back into my office and I can hear it again. I poke my head out and it stops. I lean back in and it starts again. It was almost cartoonish. It went on for quite a while and gradually faded away. There's nothing in that old building that plays music. No radio PA systems, and no one had forgotten a cell phone. It wasn't my phone, as I'd actually tried to record it, but I picked up nothing but a white noise. I walked outside on the off chance it was coming from miles away, but nothing. I only ever heard that music on Christmas Day. After that, I'd actually gotten permission to bring my husky to work, and he loved the farm, especially in the snow, but some nights he wouldn't leave my side. He would actually growl at things I had no perception of, which is strange if you own a husky. The strangest thing about that place was you could just tell it was going to be a normal all night or not when you got there. Some days the atmosphere was just different. A lot of other things happened there, but those weren't the big ones. If I get a decent response, I may share a few more stories from my time in the Marines or during my time as a cop. Thank you for listening. A couple of years ago, I babysat for a family friend. She and her husband lived with their 2 kids, a girl about 7 called Kay and a boy about 12 called J. I babysat these kids so much that we became very close, brother and sisters type of deal. They weren't difficult kids. They had a hard home life because their parents were borderline abusive, but they still were good kids. I tried my best to be a positive adult in their life. I was 18 to 19 during this. The family moved around a lot. I've known them now for over 6 years, and they have moved every single year. This experience happened in 2015. I was halfway through my senior year when the family moved into the house. It was nice, just built in 2013 or something like that, a nice neighborhood. But rent was really low. The mother often bragged about the steal of a deal she got from the house. To put in perspective, the average rent in this area is about $1,200 just for an apartment. These guys got a whole 2-story house, 3 beds, 4 baths, freshly built in a nice neighborhood for about $650. I thought that was weird and asked if there was anything wrong with the house, to which she replied the inspection came back clear. I didn't think much beyond that. I started babysitting and I immediately felt something was off. I have anxiety, so going to a new place really puts me in a funk, so I just figured that's what it was. At first, the way the home is set is important. On the bottom floor they had a living room, dining area, and a kitchen with some other rooms. I spent most of my time in the living room working on things for school while the kids were upstairs playing games or with their friends. While you're in the living room, there's a wall that blocks you from seeing the stairs. Upstairs there are bedrooms immediately off the stairs, and above the living room is the parents' room, which was off limits to the kids. Then a loft area that looks down over the front door to make a grand foyer feeling. There's a light that can be on, which can be seen from downstairs because of the loft. Then the kids' bedrooms were down a hallway. Now let's get into the experiences. Nothing happened really at first. That was 2 mind-boggling little noises here and there, knocks on the walls, things being misplaced, lights flickering, but nothing that made me think ghosts. I figured they got what they paid for, and my memory was garbage. After a couple of months of that, things started picking up. The kids, who were usually very sweet and kind to each other, started becoming noticeably more snappy to everyone, especially Jay. He had complained about nightmares he had started having about someone standing in his doorway watching him. His parents wouldn't listen, though their behavior grew even worse as time went on. It was a weekend and the parents were going to be gone for a while. The kids were upstairs doing their thing. I was downstairs in the living room looking at a pizza to order for lunch. Out of nowhere I hear really loud footsteps coming from above me in the parents' bedroom. Thunderous, even thinking it was the kids being little dingus meats. I immediately headed upstairs to tell them to get out, but I was greeted with the two kids standing in their doorways staring at the closed door to their parents' room, the footsteps bangs still continuing inside. At this point I thought it was an intruder and instructed the kids to get into their rooms and lock their doors. I called 911 and explained the situation. As I stayed on the phone, the footsteps continued to walk around the room. I could hear it moving to different locations of the room. 2 officers arrived, so I grabbed the kids and we waited outside, the banging still continuing. As one of the officers escorted us out, they came out empty-handed and said nothing was there and that it may have been something with the door because the banging stopped. As soon as they opened the door, I had felt the shaking of the floor moving around the room, so I knew it wasn't the door. But I guess in my denial I ignored it and took the kids out for ice cream, trying not to think about it. Another time the kids and I were sitting in the dining area eating dinner. It was only 3 of us in the house, and from the dining area you could see the light upstairs was on, and it cast a shadow onto the front door. I was making a joke about how I'm the only one who knows how to turn off a light around here, and I saw a shadow of a hand from upstairs on the front door, and I think that's when it really started settling down with me that the house was haunted. The kids didn't see it, and I didn't tell them. I figured it would just add stress they didn't need. I told the parents that night when they came home, but they brushed me off, seeing they haven't experienced anything. This continued on for a while. I would experience something, the kids would, but the parents wouldn't believe any of us. It was summer just after I graduated high school. I remember it vividly because I was awake reading articles about a huge shooting that happened in my town. That's when the banging from upstairs started happening. I was used to it at this point, but what I was not used to was the banging footsteps coming down the stairs. These steps were methodical and menacing. I felt terrible energy in the room, and it was cold despite it being in the middle of summer in the south. I counted the seconds between steps, and it was 5 every single time. I called out to the kids and told them to stop joking around, but I knew it was not the kids. I was terrified. The footsteps stopped at the bottom of the stairs, and I couldn't see who was there. Then I saw an apparition. It was of a little girl. She had brunette hair and a red dress. She looked innocent enough, but the energy in the room was so heavy I almost threw up. She looked at me, and I looked at her. She didn't move. I figured I was hallucinating and began rubbing my eyes. But when I finished rubbing them, she was right in front of me. In that situation, I couldn't move or do anything. My mind just went to kid brain, and I hid underneath the blanket I was using. I called the parents crying and told them to come back immediately. When they came, the energy in the room lightened, and I finally came out from under the blanket. She was gone. They asked what was wrong and what happened, and I told them it didn't matter because they wouldn't believe me. I then informed them to find another babysitter because I would not be returning. I still wonder about the kids. I hope they ended up okay. They moved out of that house at the end of the year, but I'm not sure if what I saw was attached to them or not. I'm still not sure what I saw. Anyway, thanks for listening. If you made it this far, sorry if it seems so scrambled. I still have nightmares about the girl, and it's still a really frightening event to me. 12 years ago, we moved into a very haunted apartment. For context, I will need to go further back in the timeline, as my stepson was a huge component of the story. These stories about my stepson were relayed to me from my husband. I believe my stepson as a child was sensitive to ghosts, paranormal, and whatever else. An accident happened when my stepson was a baby at another haunted apartment where he woke up in the middle of the night crying like he was hurt in his crib. My husband and his mom noticed 3 scratches on his back. Of course, this can be explained, yet my husband insisted that those scratches were not there prior to putting him to sleep. Another strange phenomenon is that almost every photo of my stepson had some orb near him. Of course, this can be explained, yet there were photos of just his foot in the background and a well-placed orb near his foot. No matter the location of the photo, 90% of the photos we had of him had this weird orb. Now jumping back 12 years ago, we had found an apartment to rent. We had terrible credit, and the landlord gave us a chance. We were excited, as the apartment was in a relatively decent part of town, and also to be getting our own space as we'd been living with my mom. One thing I remember when the landlord first showed us the apartment is that he said he had to do extensive renovations to it as the previous tenants destroyed the place the first month. I started noticing small shadows from the two bedrooms out of the corner of my eyes. I chalked it up to just exhaustion because I had my then 1-year-old son. Things grew more intense when I put my 1-year-old down for a nap and decided to shower. I left the door open that led from the single bathroom to my bedroom just in case my 1-year-old woke up as I was showering. I felt as though someone was watching me. When I opened my eyes, I see a black shadow run past the door. My 1-year-old started crying hysterically. I got out of the shower and looked around the house, convinced someone broke in. I checked the front door and everything was locked. A month or so passed from this incident. My two stepkids, said 7 and 8 at the time, would come one day a week. On some weekends their room was relatively unused. I started hearing their sliding wood closet doors knock and a strange rotten egg smell coming from their room. I searched high and low for the source of the smell, but I never found anything. My mother-in-law had stayed over a few times and would tease that the kids must have left an egg salad sandwich somewhere. My husband heard the knocking at some point, yet stocked it up to the air conditioning kicking on one weekend. My husband was out of town for work and I was alone with all the kids. I had gotten them all to sleep and had decided to stay up and watch Ghost Adventures. I was laying on the couch when I happened to look up and see my stepson standing by the couch with his eyes closed. I immediately realized he was sleepwalking, which happened from time to time. He started mumbling about an old scary M in his closet. I stupidly figured he was having a nightmare and guided him back to his bed. As I started to walk out of the room, my stepson sat up in bed and mumbled again. The old man in the closet is looking at me. I looked over to see the closet open and instantly got creeped out. Then my stepson said he's going to knock. Then 3 quick knocks happened immediately. The smell of rotten eggs got heavy in the room. I flicked the lights on and guided my stepson to my bedroom. I was freaking out internally because my stepdaughter was on the bunk in that room sleeping and I did not want to leave her alone. I got all the kids into my bed and stayed up until I no longer could fight sleep. I'm not really religious, but I asked my mother for some advice on what to do. She said to pray over the rooms and get oil on my fingers and place crosses over each door frame. I did exactly what she told me to. That night I had a terrible nightmare that my mom was possessed. In the nightmare she had died a gruesome death that I was made to watch. I woke up hysterically crying. I wanted nothing more than to be able to just move, but it was not an option. After this, the activity in the apartment calmed, yet one new thing started happening. One night I woke up to my bed shaking. It felt as though someone had placed their knees against our mattress and was shaking it. As soon as I tried to wake my husband up to see if he felt it, it would immediately stop. This would happen weekly. For context, my 1-year-old son slept in a toddler bed in front of our bed. One night my 1-year-old and I were up in the living room. My husband went to bed early as he had to go to work early the next day. He came out looking upset and said to stop allowing our 1-year-old to come into the room because he was shaking the bed. I told him our son never went into the room. As soon as I finished that sentence, the glass cover to the entryway light, which was right behind me, came crashing down. My husband stood there sleepily trying to process everything he finally was feeling and seeing. The things I'd been dealing with. One day, a house nearby was for rent and we moved out. We were at this apartment for less than a year. We never experienced anything like what we'd experienced in that apartment. I felt relief because I was worried that whatever was in this place might attach itself to us. My stepson passed away in 2019 due to possible COVID. I had told him the story prior to his passing when he was in his teens and he claimed to not remember the incident in the apartment. I fully believe he saw whatever entity was in that apartment when I was little, maybe around S or so. I had my first paranormal experience. My mom always told me that she felt like I attracted things from the spiritual realm even as a baby, but this experience is the first one that is my own memory and I remember it vividly. I'm now 26 years old. My mom was unlucky enough to have not only my father die, but also my little sister's father. My dad passed away due to a car accident, and my sister's father ended himself after a battle with severe depression. Needless to say, my mom had it pretty rough, and being a single working mother, she would often take us to a family friend who babysat us while she worked late nights at the hospital. The woman who babysat us was a warm, kind, and gentle woman named Rhonda. She always took the best care of us and my sister, and I really enjoyed staying with her. Rhonda had two birds who we loved to talk to, and they would repeat simple things like, "Hello" and "What's up?" We thought it was the coolest thing after a long day of playing. My sister and I were off to bed, and Rhonda tucked me into my bed in her spare room. Downstairs, my sister was still pretty little, and she slept in the same room as Rhonda because she was too scared to sleep alone, and Rhonda was like a grandma to us, who was more than happy to share her bed if we got scared. I was a big girl and loved having my own room to sleep in, and I was never scared on this night, though I was having trouble falling asleep, and I just kept tossing and turning, growing frustrated that I wasn't asleep, and for some reason I began to get anxiety and become fearful. I didn't know why I was scared, but I was after what felt like forever of me. Laying there contemplating getting up and crawling into Rhonda's bed, I heard something in a low, calm male voice say, "Marissa, it's okay, just go to sleep." This surprised me, but it didn't scare me. I believe that as a child you're more open and susceptible to paranormal things due to the fact that you're not conditioned to be fearful yet. With age you learn what's scary and all the things that go bump in the night that you should run away from, but I was still so innocent that I didn't register this as threatening. Actually, this calmed me down, and I started to feel very tired and just accepted what the voice told me and went to sleep. The next morning Rhonda made us breakfast as she always did. She sat across from me and sipped her coffee that I always ask for a sip of, because if I wasn't already a strange child, I also had a taste for coffee. She asked me how I slept, and I told her that I was scared and that someone told me to go to sleep. She looked at me confused, and she asked me if I had a dream that someone was talking to me, and I told her no, I was awake. She said it was probably the birds talking, and again I told her I was sure it wasn't. She then asked me if it was a man's voice or a woman's voice, and when I instantly said it was a man's voice, her face changed from the usual cheery war expression to put off and uncomfortable. I had never seen her face look like that before, and I think that's why I remember this so vividly. She changed the subject quickly, and we went about our day, and I didn't think about that again for years. Fast forward into my teen, my mom and I were having a discussion about the paranormal because I had a lot of strange activity happening, and she asked me what the first experience I remember was. I shared the story about the man's voice at Rhonda's house and how odd Rhonda's reaction was, and my mom looked at me and her eyes widened a bit. Now Rhonda went a little Mia a few years later, and unfortunately she just slowly lost contact with us, and eventually she was no longer a part of our lives. I hadn't seen her in years. When my mom collected her thoughts, she looked at me and said, "Marissa, you know Rhonda's son died in that room, right?" I did not. I knew she had a son who passed away of a tragic overdose, but I was so young and never met him, so I didn't think about it. I looked back at my mom, and we didn't have to say anything. We both were thinking the same thing. If I was hearing a spirit speak to me, there's a good chance it could have been her son. From what my mom said about him, he was a very kind and caring person, much like his mom. Maybe that's why I wasn't afraid when if he spoke to me. I'm not saying that this is factually what happened, but it does make me wonder the voice I heard was real. That much I do know. Regardless of who it belonged to, it's sure to me that much is true. Since that experience I've had many more, and unfortunately they got much more sinister. As I got older, it got very dark for a while, and I witnessed things that you usually only see in horror movies. I still think of this experience often, and I hope that you enjoyed listening to my testimony. If you did enjoy this story, I also share my experiences as well as other strange and unusual things on my YouTube channel. My handle is Marissa White. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and remember, the spirit realm is just as real as you or I. This is one of many stories that I have from working night shift at a laundromat in a bad area. It's definitely the freakiest. So for context, my mom took a job years ago at a local laundromat. Because we knew the owner and needed extra money, I was around 10 when she got the job, and she allowed me to come with her because she would give me a little allowance for helping her do small tasks. I ended up going with her every night for years, and as I got older, I mainly went to make sure my mom was safe. Because I was worried about her, we regularly dealt with angry customers refusing to leave, most of which were drunk or high, and we had to call the police a few times. My mom was always worried about me tagging along, but I insisted, and to this day I still can't say I regret it. A lot of good came out of it, mainly the work experience, and that made up for how intense it could be. I had a lot of interesting stories from that time, but this one takes the cake for the most horrifying, and it took place when I was about 12. Being the young and dumb kid that I designated myself the job of chasing people off when it was closing time. We would have people parking behind the building pretty regularly, so I would walk to the side of the building and start yelling that they were trespassing and that I'd call the cops if they didn't leave. I feel that this is important to bring up because I now realize that I let any shady person hanging around the building at night know of my presence, and that's a dangerous thing to do when you're a 12-year-old girl. I was blissfully unaware that anything could happen to me until one night when we showed up to find that the door lock had been broken. My mom had unlocked the building that morning, so it wasn't like this was a breaking attempt since it had been unlocked all day. We were a bit shaken up, but my mom texted her boss to let him know about it. She told me to tell her if I saw anyone pull up. After about 30 minutes I finished my few tasks and sat down to draw in my sketchbook. I had barely been sat down for a few minutes when I heard the door swing open, which startled me because normally people just knock when they see the closed sign. My mom noticed it too and yelled out that we were closed. I heard an older man's voice respond, explaining that he'd just come in to use our drink machine. We normally let people in to use our snack and drink machines, so my mom told him he had a few minutes and went back into the closet to grab something. I was sat about 7 feet away from the drink machine, so I heard him walk up but didn't really pay much attention to him. I continued to draw until I started getting the feeling that someone was watching me, and I realized I didn't hear this guy put any money into the drink machine. I nervously glanced to my left and saw a tall man in his mid-60s staring right at me with a big smile on his face. I jumped a bit, but forced an awkward smile back at him and directed my attention back to drawing. As soon as I did this, I heard what sounded like shuffling, and when I looked over again, he was closer. I didn't know what to do, so I tried to just not look at him, but every time I would look away, he would shuffle closer. His body was still facing the drink machine, but his neck was craned in my direction, and he wouldn't stop smiling and staring. I began shaking and panicking, and my eyes were darting back and forth between him and the closet door while I tried to plan a fast escape. I went to reach for my knife in my bag because I couldn't even imagine this man's intentions, and I quickly realized that it was not there. I'd left my knife at home when I needed it the most, and I was petrified. I decided to just stare back at him despite being terrified and trembling violently, and after what felt like an eternity, he suddenly broke eye contact and yelled to my mom to have a good night before turning around, and in walking out, relief hit me instantly, and I tried to calm myself down. After what had just happened, I thought I was finally safe and started to get up to go splash some water on my face when I saw him sit down on the bench outside. Panic and dread hit me like a brick, and I sprinted into the closet to hide. I filled my mom in on everything, and she told me to run to the car and she'd get between me and him, and that she'd pepper spray him if needed. I did as she told me and ran to the car, and as I passed him, he stood up and began walking toward the car. My mom yelled at him to get away from it, and his reaction was to try to calmly start a conversation about the making model of her car, all while staring right at me. She ignored him, hopped in the car, locked us in, and started backing up as quickly as she could. I ducked down in my seat, but I could still see him standing there, and I know he could see me because I watched as he lifted his hand and waved me goodbye before walking around to the back of the building and disappearing into the darkness. I felt sick. I couldn't sleep that night, and I never dared set foot anywhere near the back of that building again, so I guess that was a lesson learned. So creepy old smiling man, let's not meet music again. When I was in my first year out of school, my older brother and I moved into a small 2-story apartment in Scarborough, Western Australia. It was relatively cheap and in a great location, with the only drawback being the apartment seemed half finished in places. There were quite a few outdoor areas that were crumbling away, and even some of the walls in the upstairs area had sections of the wall unpainted. We were apparently the first tenants since a renovation. Our parents would come and stay with us from time to time, and we still talk about our weird experiences in that place today. It always had an eerie feeling to it, with random rooms at odd angles and a very uncomfortable aura, for lack of a better word. The biggest feeling I had at the time was that I always felt like I was going to look down the staircase from the top living area and see someone Run past, I don't know why I even thought that, but my parents said it was one of the first things that I said to them about the place. It all started one Friday night when I was staying home. With my mom, we were both sitting on the couch watching TV at about 9 p.m. With only the lampshade and kitchen light on, we both felt something really odd that I've never felt before or since. Like all the air was getting sucked out of the room, or there was a pressure change or something similar. We felt like we couldn't move, and it was like we were stuck in place. A shadow then appeared on the wall to the back left of the TV. It was about the size of a small person, but almost just looked like a blob in a vague shape of a human. It moved diagonally up the wall to the left as if it were climbing a set of stairs. It then disappeared, and we spent the rest of the night in hysterics, leaving the house until my brother and dad returned a few hours later. What must have been a few weekends later, another encounter occurred. I had just been at the cinemas watching a film with some friends. The film was White Noise, and it was based on hearing ghosts speak to you through the static of an untuned radio. It was a pretty average movie, but an interesting idea. That night, while asleep in bed, my clock radio turned on max volume right next to my head at about 1 a.m. It was 10 seconds of chaos as I tried to turn off the radio alarm, but nothing was turning off the sound in my half-asleep state. I didn't think to pull it out of the wall. After about 10 seconds it finally turned off. I somehow went back to sleep, but I remember at the time knowing that it was the scariest thing that had ever happened to me, and that I had just encountered something. The next morning, I woke up to find the court for the alarm clock in the middle of the room, under my bed, nowhere near the wall. Not long after that encounter, we had some friends around for some drinks in our living room, and there was another incident. An old CD player of my brother's was sitting on the table, and all of a sudden it turned on at max volume. It was playing some weird Indian sitar sounding music. Needless to say, it scared the hell out of everyone in the room, if not only because of the loud noise out of nowhere. At another point during the night, the sound of a girl screaming came from upstairs and was eventually explained away by one of my friends as coming from a neighbor's house, even though it felt like it was directly above us. Another instance occurred on an evening when my mom was staying with us and my brother and dad were away. We had a tennis table in our garage that was connected to the house through the laundry room. I had fallen asleep on the couch and woke up at about 2 a.m. Went to the laundry to have a drink of water from the tap, and I could hear people playing tennis beyond the door to the garage. I was frozen in fear. I put my ear right up to the door, and I could hear the sounds of a game being played, but I knew that my mom and myself were the only ones in the apartment. I retreated and went to bed, knowing that I was too weak to open the door and confront whatever was in there. I somehow fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up and went downstairs for breakfast. The first thing my mom said to me is, "How late were you and your friends up playing table tennis last night?" I got up to go to the toilet at 3 a.m. and I could hear a game going on in there, so that was pretty spine-tingling. The last story that I can think of at the moment is when I was at a friend's house one night. I received a phone call from my brother, who was at home. As I answered, he said, "How drunk are you? I can hear you rattling the key in the door." I explained that I was at a friend's house, to which he replied, and he hung up. He calls me back 5 minutes later and explained that as soon as he hung up, he heard what sounded like a large animal run along the side of the house from the front, along the side fence, and within seconds was knocking aggressively at the back door. He went to the back door and there was nothing there. Does anyone have any ideas as to what we are dealing with? The most haunted road in New Jersey, Clinton Road. This was a couple of years ago. I was still in college. I worked at my local high school in South Jersey on the night shift for some extra money, but unfortunately the hours meant I didn't really get to have a life during the week. I get a call from my friend group on a Friday before I headed into work, saying they were going to explore Clinton Road, which was known to be the scariest road in New Jersey. Obviously I couldn't go, so I told them to let me know how they made it out. Later in the night, I get a call from them in panic, saying all these crazy things happened to them. They described what happened to them, how they threw their coins over Ghost Boy Bridge and they came back, a ghost truck following them, and the feeling of being watched. I thought they were just hyping it up because I missed out, so it was decided we'd all go the next night, but this time I got to see it for myself, something I'd regret for the rest of my life. Us being from South Jersey, Clinton Road is a bit of a drive for us, about 2 hours, so there was plenty of time for us to get all hyped up and spooked out. Now I can only Describe myself as the manly man of the group, being 6 feet 5 inches. 260, especially back then. I had the persona of, it's all made up nothing. Will scare us. Boy, was I wrong. Right when we got there, the entire vibe changed. From, oh, we're all going to be spooked, to, oh wait, this is actually pretty damn creepy. The road is in the middle of the woods, houses few and far between. The first thing we see when we get there is a small mini castle looking building. Is the best I can describe it, and because of the far ride we all had to pee, so I went to the left, my friend Joe went straight, and my friend Hor went to the right. Friend 4 was a female who stayed behind us in the road. After I was done, I immediately walked back along with Hor, but we noticed Joe walking towards the creepy building. I start shouting, asking what he's doing. He turns back around with a look of shock. Me being completely confused, I ask what he's doing walking there. Joe swore up and down that I was actually behind the building waving at him to follow me in, so naturally we're all getting freaked out. We pull up to the bridge and I check everyone for coins to make sure they don't fake it just to scare me. We all throw the coins, nothing happens. See guys, it's all in your head, let's go, I say. So we all start walking back to the car. Cling, 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 I hear the coins hit the road. We sprint back to check and we find the coins laying in the road. I was 100% convinced they were just messing with me, so I had the idea to mark a coin so they couldn't fake it. We threw the coin in the water, waited 5 minutes in silence, nothing. See guys, let's go. Cling, 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 I hear the coins in the road. I walk back. I'll be damned, it was a coin with the exact same markings I'd put on it. I'm extremely freaked out at this point, so we decide to go driving down the windy road in a newer sports car. We are all freaked and just want to leave. We see headlights appear behind us, seemingly out of nowhere. We didn't see them attached to a vehicle. I'm no car expert, but I bet my life they were lights of an old truck. Getting closer the faster we went, taking bends at fast speeds that even a new truck wouldn't be able to handle. Suddenly the lights disappear, so now all in a panic we decide to pull over to map our way out. Dead silence, no light except our headlights in the woods. We then hear the typical female ghost moan, and of course what came with it was the typical woman in white dress standing in the woods right next to our car, and she let out the loudest scream I've ever heard. We're screaming at this point to get out of Dodge. Once we make it back to the main roads, we decide to dig a little deeper. On this road, apparently the ghost truck tries to make people crash on Dead Man's Curve. There have been numerous bodies buried there from the famous murderer, the Iceman. On our way home we were so ballsy and wanted to go back again. The next night we suddenly pass an old run-down church that looks like it hasn't been used in 50 years, and of course the sign left out front, "You need Jesus on Sunday." Safe to say that I never went back, and even up to this day my friend group still refused to talk about what happened that night on Clinton Road. This is the story about how 3 U.S. Marines were scared shitless within only a few hours, including myself. I have a friend who's really into the paranormal like myself, Jake. It was October 2018 and we just wanted to go ghost hunting or explore supposedly haunted buildings and areas. We had been researching and decided our drive limit was 4 hours. I came across a place called the Devil's Tramping Ground. At the place there is a circle in the woods that can't grow grass, and the trees make a circle around it. As the legend has it, the devil himself uses that circle of sand and dirt as a portal. He comes to earth at night and stomps on the ground, pacing back and forth. We read that if you tried to sleep there on the circle, you will hear a soothing female singing which will put you to sleep, and then you will wake up in a different location. So what did we do? Brought tents, sleeping bags, chairs, and beer, of course. Okay, back to the story. Jake and I were planning our trip, and another one of my buddies caught wind of it. My buddy's name was Nick. We were all set to go on Friday. When we got out of work, we left base at around 4 o'clock p.m. and didn't hit the road until roughly 8 p.m. because we kept getting sidetracked at different stores. I'll skip right to the good part. We get off the highway. It's close to midnight. We have our GPS on, and it wants us to go down the only damn road with no street lights. Of course, we start driving down that narrow dark road slowly so we can find the clearing for the Devil's Tramping Ground. We read that there would be satanic symbols in front of the clearing written on the road. We had our eyes peeled. There was something odd about this road. We were being chased the entire way by about 10 dogs and one black dog. Every dog was barking except for that black dog. He kept appearing in the woods to the left of us and in front of us as we were driving, as if he was trying to turn us around. We found the symbols and knew it was there. The dogs hadn't followed us that far. We parked and got out with flashlights to scope out the area. I'm not going to lie, it was extremely unsettling. We made our way up to the circle and thought, perfect, let's go get our Fast forward about an hour, it's quiet. We have our tents set up in a circle with our chairs set up surrounding our cooler. We were just telling ghost stories and drinking. Nothing really seemed to bother us other than the occasional twig snapping that sounded like footsteps and the feeling of being watched. We just chalked it up to the animals. It's 2 a.m. now. I start to hear voices all around me, and I'm not the only one. Nick and Jake heard it too. It felt like we were about to be jumped by a group of men surrounding us, but we knew whatever it was wasn't human. The voices stopped and I understood. You not at the same time the car light turned on. We went to the car to find all of the doors open. Unnerved, we slowly closed all the doors and went back to drinking. 2:30 a.m. comes along. We're all on edge. We're not even drunk at this point because of the events that just took place. Everyone was silent. I could hear and feel my heart beating out of my chest. You'll never believe it. We all heard beautiful humming coming from every direction. I wish I could describe how it sounded, but we knew that was not good. We all leaned as the singing was going on. Without one word spoken, we all got up and went to the car and got out of there. We then visited Lydia's bridge because it was nearby, and it said that Lydia walks the road on the bridge at night. We didn't see anything, and we slept in a nearby Walmart parking lot. In the car we went back the next morning to collect our things. I thought you guys might enjoy this. I visited a house this week for work here in England. Most of our houses are built in the late Victorian to early 20th century period, but sometimes older houses are still standing. Occasionally I'll see an 18th century house, and once I did a job on a remote island in the English Channel where the farmhouses had parts which dated from the late 17th century. I'd been doing my job for a long time, and this week I was scheduled to inspect the oldest house I'd ever worked on, built in the 1500s. The owner is there to let me in, and after a quick chat she leaves me to get on with my job. The house is vacant and no one has lived there for a few years or so. Lovely bright sunshine, and in the middle of a hot afternoon I start to look around the ground floor in small basement. The house is detached on a big plot, but there are other houses and people around, and this is a nice suburban neighborhood that I'm very familiar with. I go upstairs and try to get into the loft, in the end deciding that the floors are too uneven for my ladder and that I don't want to move the owner's furniture in order to get up. There's so far no spookiness. Bear in mind that I'm in empty old houses all the time and almost never feel anything weird. I'm not one of these people who thinks that they can commune with the dead or anything. Open the curtains and open the windows of most haunted houses, and the scare factor is removed anyway after about 40 minutes. I'm nearly ready to go, and it finished my job before I realized that I haven't been in the back bedroom yet. There are 5 bedrooms upstairs, and I've only been in 4 of them. I'm not expecting to see anything that I haven't seen in the other rooms, but I should really give a cursory once-over of each room to do my job properly. I head back down the hallway and go to the back bedroom. You already know what's coming next. Nothing weird with the decor of the room. It has the same wallpaper and carpet as the rest of the house, same little timber framed window and a single bed. I think so many ghost stories rely on full rooms of spiders, coffins, or spooky kids dolls, or whatever ever, but this just looks like all the other rooms in the house. On the threshold I get a strong feeling that I'm not welcome. I don't feel cold, but I'm aware that in this room it isn't a bright summer's day anymore. I scan the room from the doorway and I'm very aware that I should not enter. I look in the mirror because my intuition tells me that I won't like what I see. I turn and leave back down the corridor, and it's a lovely sunny day again. Tension is lifted. I go back into the garden to say goodbye to the owner, who has been outside the whole time pottering around the garden. We make some small talk about the house, and as I'm trying to politely leave, the owner out of nowhere cheerfully says, "Oh, yes, and we have a ghost, of course." Before she says anything else, I point to the window of the back bedroom and say, "In this room, right?" She laughs and says, "Yes, of course," and then tells me how when she was growing up in the house that whoever slept in this room would report that the ghost of a young woman would tell them stories in the night. A little story time. I'm of Japanese descent, and each year I go visit my family in the north of Japan and also do the obon, which is basically like Dia del Muerte in Japan when the spirit of the dead come visit the land of the living. During this period, I decided to go visit Tokyo a little and, long story short, after walking for a while out of the city, I began climbing a nearby mountain to discover a substantially sized cemetery. Being a young lad of 16 at the time, I decided I'd go exploring and see which families are entered here. It was about 3 o'clock p.m. and it was scorching, and the trees here and there in the cemetery bore a welcoming shade for me to cool down a little. After about 10 minutes or so of looking around the very old stone slabs, I realized a few odd details. First, it seems I somehow got lost in the cemetery. Mind you, I have an excellent sense of geolocalization, and I found my way out of many a forest, mountains, airport, and such. The cemetery itself was lower in the middle part and surrounded by woods. So I think I was in the lower part because the horizon was only tombs. Secondly, it was getting dark. As I said before, it was around 3 p.m., so that was very odd, and the surroundings had that yellowish tinge you get at dusk. If I make a small cultural parenthesis, dusk is called Old Tasso Garrett Doi in Old Japanese, and it's supposed to be the in between moment when strange things occur, not a good time to be surrounded by tombs. Third, I was getting a little cold, not like I was plunged into an icy pool, but more like when you're in the middle of the mountains and you can feel some coldness through the gaps of your coat. After that, I began to see some weird shadows or something in the corner of my eyes. Very weird, because I wasn't feeling panicked or anything. I could calmly observe them. It was moving like old lava lamps very deliberately, and sometimes looked a bit human-shaped or like huge faces. I was walking toward it because I thought if it can harm me physically, I can certainly punch it, but it was like a mirage, and it was fluttering. After a while, I started to feel like I was in danger. I was getting colder and older, and at this moment I saw a monk who was very surprised to see me there because the cemetery was supposed to be closed at this hour. He brought me back to the entrance, and I told him it was open when I got in. He informed me that he was next to it all day, and he didn't see me pass by. I assumed he thought I went in by a fraction, so I told him everything I saw and felt. He seemed very surprised at first, and then told me to look at the hour. It was 6:10 p.m. That means I was in there for like 3 hours. He then told me I shouldn't come here while the sun is setting, that I could have been taken away by Kamikakushi. Anyway, that was my very weird experience there. The cemetery was east of Kyoto near the Shinuka mountain. So I've been holding on to this experience for about a year now, and I've decided to share it with you guys, mostly to get it off of my chest. I work in a deep underground pose mine. For anyone who has never experienced what it's like to be several thousand feet underground, it's a very uncanny experience. There's no natural lighting, and usually the only artificial light comes from your cap lamp or any vehicles you're operating. You can hear the earth shift and the vast weight above you slowly bear down on the tunnel you're working in. I've been working underground for about 6 months and was being sent to an abandoned part of the mine to make it safe enough for crews to be sent in to recover some equipment and machinery that had been left behind. The area I was being sent to was infamous for being the location. A mine operator called CRI Chris had been killed by being pinched in between 2 pieces of equipment and having his torso split in half. This accident had shaken a lot of the guys underground, and many refused to work in that area again. So as the junior operator, I was the unlucky bastard that had to go in. I was sent in by myself to get the job started, and was supposed to get another operator to come help me once I was ready. The beginning tunnel had so much dust piled up over the years that it reached my knees and made it impossible to see while driving in my bolter. A bolter is a vehicle that drives 8-foot metal bolts into the ceiling to prevent the ceiling from caving in. I remember feeling so uneasy while I was in there. It was like I wasn't supposed to be there. Once I got to my first location to start bolting, I began setting everything up. I was setting up bolts when I noticed a moving light come from the opposite end of the tunnel from where I'd entered. I initially thought it could be another worker that was also doing work in that tunnel, so I started doing cap lamp signals. It's our own form of sign language with our lights, so we can communicate. I signaled for whoever's light that was to come towards me. Once I made that signal, the light stopped moving, and after a few seconds disappeared. I was becoming worried and tried to reason to myself what the light could be. It really couldn't have been another worker because it wasn't safe to go any farther until my work was done. It couldn't have been a piece of equipment because it responded to my light. I was Terrified and honestly didn't know what to do, I was scared to attempt to leave. Because my bolter kicked up so much dust, but I also didn't want to go by foot. Because I'd only have my cap lamp for lighting, I decided to stay camped inside my bolter until my backup arrived. The light never returned, and when my coworker arrived, I gained enough confidence to finish the job and leave. I don't know what I saw, but I can't help but think it's the soul of Chris. The idea of his soul being trapped in that tunnel really bothers me, and I actually left the underground for a surface position partially because of this encounter. When I was 10 years old, I saw something that to this day, 6 years later, I cannot still understand it. All my friends and I were outside playing, enjoying our time together, and on this random day with my friends Nate and Donnie, we saw an old school completely white double-decker bus drive past the road we were walking on, and we just stood still in utter confusion because the way this bus came into our area was impossible. It physically couldn't drive into the area without driving through the entrance first, and it definitely did not do this. For some context, the area I live in has one-way access, meaning the way you come in is the way you have to go out when you want to leave inside of the bus. There were two people, a male driver dressed as if he was in the 1920s, he was strangely completely white. Two snow-colored hair with all white clothes, but he wasn't the most interesting person on this bus. There was a woman extremely similar to him in that she was completely all white too, but she was a passenger and she was acknowledging us, waving at us. I was completely dumbfounded. I just stood there in awe. I know it doesn't sound like it was that much of a spectacle, but I can't explain it. This bus had an aura that was completely captivating. These people on the bus did not seem threatening at all. They seemed benevolent and had a feeling of warmth about them. This whole situation must have lasted maybe 5 seconds at most. It was a lot to take in such a short amount of time, and out of nowhere, as the bus went past us, it just suddenly disappeared. I can't explain it. It didn't fade away, it just disappeared. I never told anyone about this until I recently told my mother, and unlike me, she's very much a believer in the supernatural, and she told me that around the same time she had a dream about her late mother, who had died a month before I was born, telling her that she had to go, that she had a bus to catch. I know it's a far-fetched theory to assume it was my grandmother, and I don't even know if I believe it in all honesty, but all I do know is that I definitely saw something that day, and whatever it was wasn't normal as we know. Normal. Does anyone with more knowledge on these supernatural things have any theories on what my friends and I saw that day? So my husband took me to the Stanley for my birthday. We stayed only one night. When we got there, we joined this ghost tour that they had going on, and they talked about the history of the hotel and whatnot. I left during the tour to go to the bathroom. I come back and the tour is pretty much done. No biggie, right? Fast forward to the butt crack of dawn. I'm the lightest sleeper on earth, and I hear this loud scratching at our door, and I'm immediately wide awake. It stops after about 20 seconds, and I lay back down, and a few seconds later the scratching starts again. I sit up in bed and was weirded out because to get to our room you had to go through this corridor where our room was, and furthermore you had to have a key pass to get through that first door, so it wasn't like you could just walk up to our door or anything, and there was nothing outside our door when we went to bed. The scratching was loud and sounded like claws on the door, and you could tell it was coming from the bottom part of the door. I woke my husband up finally and asked if he could hear that scratching on the door. The scratching stopped the second he woke up. He thought I was crazy and laughed. He said it was probably people outside, and I said no, it was coming from the door. I was adamant that it was the door because I got close enough to know it was the door. I could hear it as clearly as I could hear him. He said I was just looking for a reason to be scared by a ghost, so I must have imagined it. I was getting annoyed because I never mentioned anything about a ghost. All I said is that there was a loud scratching at the door, and I was wondering what it could possibly be because we're in a corridor, and it sure as hell wasn't people outside our door. I was dumbfounded and irritated because I had no clue what it was. It was bothering me. What was it? I didn't imagine it. The next morning when we went to check out, I asked the worker what could possibly be scratching at my door. That early in the morning his eyes got big, and he went and got another worker who worked there for a long time. I told him everything, and he said it was a ghost dog that used to wake people up at the crack of dawn by scratching at their door. My husband chimes in, "Oh yeah, you were in the bathroom when the guy was talking about the ghost dog." I almost choked. My husband Out I grew up in a small town. My house is one of the oldest ones in the town. We live right beside 3 sets of train tracks. Growing up, I've always heard voices. My friend heard them too in my house. They weren't regular voices. It's hard to explain, but if she didn't hear them with me, I would have passed it off as my imagination. It was only words here and there, but they came across like a dream. We heard them, but we knew they weren't there. It was like a fast car zooming by. It was always a man, and we never knew what exactly he was saying. It was a regular occurrence when I was growing up that stuff would fly off the back of the toilet and hit the opposite wall in our bathroom. My mom finally told them to shut up, and it stopped when I was about 12. My parents and my brother went to my brother's hockey game at the local arena. I stayed at home and had a bath. Our bathroom was on the left of the hallway with the washer and dryer on the right, and a door leading to an old office room that had stairs going to the basement. I was having my bath. I heard heavy boot steps come up the stairs towards the back door. All of a sudden they stopped, and then they were outside of the bathroom door. It sounded like something either kicked or punched the washing machine. It was loud. I was so scared I got dressed and ran away to a friend's house without leaving a note. I got used to the big guy and found out through a silhouette there was a woman in the house as well. She's not nice and hangs around the stairs. Even now at 31 years of age, if I go up the stairs at my parents' house, I always have this horrible feeling that someone is behind me and wants to pull me down. I have never had that feeling anywhere else. My nephew is autistic and would talk to the ghosts. When my nephew was 4, he told my mom that the man's name is Sonny, and that Sonny watches us. He told her that if we wanted to see Sonny, we would have to go down to the basement and dig. Sonny died falling on the train tracks. He doesn't like the woman and won't go up the stairs alone, so I don't know much about her other than that she is not nice. I have many more EXP experiences, but I think I'm done for now. I hope you enjoyed that. On a fairly busy road last night at about 8:45, there was a human figure, I think a woman, standing almost to the white line, to the point that I had to move to not hit them. A German shepherd at her side, and the dog was bouncing, but she was completely unmoving, shoulders hunched forward, face slightly down, and tilted white hair down past her shoulders, dark clothes that were more like shrouds. The clothes looked like they were a pair of clothes or blankets. Somehow it's really hard to explain. The dog was also kind of pulling or being restrained by what I assumed was a leash, though I didn't see a leash or the lady's hand, but the lady didn't move at all. Not an arm, not a shoulder, nothing. Totally still in that first flash of a second. I'm thinking this person is mentally ill or on drugs, but this is the part one cannot get over, and my 15-year-old daughter saw it too. This person had no face. It was a completely white void that was 100% scent, not a mask or covering anything else. This person was actually faceless. There was no dimension, shadow, texture, definition. Nothing, just blank, pure white that was just empty. I'm truly certain what I saw was not a mask, hood, face paint, or some other costume or prank. I have never seen anything so messed up in my life. I wanted to turn around to look again, but my other child was scared and crying from our reactions and begging me not to. So I didn't. She didn't see it like my other child, and I did. I got home and posted on a social media unexplained phenomenon group from my state, and someone else had seen it and was also nerfed by it too, but they didn't see the blank face. Another person had called it into the police, saying the woman was just sitting with her back to the room road as they drove by, and the police checked the area with no findings. I'm open to finding out more about this from people who may know. I've driven on this road thousands of times in the last couple of decades, and I've never seen or heard of. I was just talking to my uncle, who was a retired sailor, and he told me a story that I felt was perfect. My uncle used to work on board the Great Lakes freighter, the SS Arthur M. Anderson, and they would haul iron ore and limestone across the Great Lakes. One day at around 7 p.m. in November of 2007, they were crossing Lake Superior on their way to Cleveland, Ohio, when they started receiving distress calls on their radio from an unknown vessel claiming to be the SS Edmund Fitzgerald. The SS Edmund Fitzgerald famously sank in 1975, taking all 29 crewmen with it. Well, he said at first they all thought it was some kind of distasteful prank until they checked the radar and found that there were no other ships around for at least 70 nautical miles, and the range on the radios are only 60 nautical miles. He said that the voice they heard from the radio described a heavy storm and high winds, and that they were having a hard time holding their own, my uncle said you could hear true fear in the man's voice from over the radio, but the thing was there was no storm at all. In fact, the water was calm and the night was clear at around 8 p.m. My uncle said that the distress calls on the radio came to an abrupt stop, leaving the whole room in a terrifying silence, and the radio stayed quiet for the rest of the night. Nobody was able to sleep that night, haunted by what they had witnessed. When it comes down to it, there is a sense of irony in this event being is not only is the ship my uncle was on the SS Arthur M. Anderson, the sister ship to the Edmund Fitzgerald, but it was also the last ship to make contact with the Edmund Fitzgerald in 1975. When she sank, could my uncle and his shipmates have actually made contact with the ghosts of the crew of the Edmund Fitzgerald, or could there be another explanation of this event? We'll never know, but it made one of the creepiest stories I've ever heard. I was posted in a primary healthcare center with a fellow senior doctor. It was our night shift, and he started to tell me stories of the time when he was doing autopsies in the same hospital. He was shifted to PHC later because he couldn't deal with the trauma that came later. He said that not all autopsies led to haunting, but it was people who killed themselves or cases of assault where the cause of death was unnatural that led to some of the most disturbing paranormal activities. One such case, he narrated that night, was of a woman in her mid-20s who was assaulted, then strangulated, and later her body was thrown into the well by her in-laws. Such incidents are common in rural areas of India. They hope to escape the charges, but after thorough examination of her lungs by my colleague, the senior doctor who did her autopsy, it was obvious that she was killed first and drowned later. The in-laws of this woman tried to pay a hefty amount to him so they could escape the charges, but he refused. After that incident, he said that he often saw the woman, wet hair, bulging eyes, naked with a white pale body, often sitting by his bedside just looking at him. He said it wasn't sleep paralysis. He was shattered when one time as he was combing his hair in the bathroom mirror, and he saw that same woman just peeking at him through the door. Only her eyes and wet hair were visible through the mirror. It became so traumatic that he left that part of his profession completely, even though he was getting paid a lot for that job. He said he doesn't ever wish to go back, and the fact that it was the same hospital where I'm working right now, it's kind of creepy. I'm not going to lie, I'm a singer, so late nights are common for me. This night I was driving myself and 4 bandmates home from a show. It's about a 2-hour drive. We jamming out to the radio and talking, and everything is fine until I get to the road that's over a big lake in our state. As soon as I hit that bridge, I felt uneasy. I didn't want to look like a weenie, so I didn't say anything to everyone else until I saw the guy walking on the shoulder of the bridge, which is practically non-existent. I swerve a little to miss him, and the guy start asking if I was okay and why I swerved when I said it was to miss the guy. Everyone says, "What guy?" So I described him. He had on a dark jacket, camo cargo pants, dark shoes, and wet hair. No one saw him, and they laugh it off. I saw him again just a few feet ahead and pointed him out, but no one sees him. I'm freaking out because he's there a few miles ahead. I see him again. This time my drummer sees him too, and he said I wasn't kidding and describes his face because he turned. This time he described exactly what I saw. I started driving faster and he showed up every few miles. He turned his head and grinned this scary ass grin. I almost started crying. Anyway, once we got to the woods past the bridge, I thought we'd be fine. But he kept appearing until we got close to town, then he was gone. I've never seen him again. That was one of the scariest ghost encounters I've had. His hair and clothes were wet, so I'm guessing it was the spirit of someone who drowned in the lake and is sticking around to mess with people, but he scared me pretty bad. My mom used to work night shift at a hospital before she retired years ago. She had a terrifying experience that she recently told me about. During one of her shifts, she had an elderly patient that was in the ICU getting ready to pass. Oftentimes my mom would sit and visit with her patients during her downtime. The woman was crying, so my mom held her hand and asked what was wrong. While still crying, the woman said that he was here for her. She said that he was evil when he was alive, and he's still just as evil as now. Confused, my mom asked if the lady was talking about her husband. The woman told my mother her dead husband made her life a living hell, and now on her deathbed had been in her room for days tormenting her. He told her he was here to take her. She said he'd been standing in the corner of the room since she was admitted into the ICU. My mother offered to pray with the woman, which she accepted. The woman eventually passed, but it told my mother before she went that she no longer saw her husband and was able to go in peace. This happened quite a few years ago. I had an affinity with a particular white substance in the form of lines back then. One very cold, snowy night, around 11 p.m., I went for a walk to meet my dealer. I'd never been to his place before, so he gave me the address to his small 2-story apartment building with maybe 6 units in it. Upon arrival, I noticed several rangers inside after they had hit their pipes. 2 clearly unwashed guys came over to sit at the dining table while I waited for my dealer. I've never smoked anything besides weed and cigarettes. I was instantly uncomfortable. They tried making small talk, but I grew increasingly uneasy, giving only short, vague answers. I quickly paid for my stuff, grabbed the baggie, and got up from the table. That's when one of the guys was offered to walk me home. My heart started to sink. I politely declined. "Oh, I'm okay, thanks, I don't live that far," I said. The other guy stood up. "No, really, we can walk you home. We don't mind, we have to get going anyway." That's when my instincts finally kicked in. I became very aware and very scared. I immediately thought, I'm fully dressed in, ready to go, but they still have to put on their coats and shoes. If I leave now, I'll get a head start and quickly disappear. They said something else as I headed for the door, but I pretended to take a phone call, waved goodbye to my dealer, and closed the door behind me. I jogged down the hallway to the outside door, and once I got outside, I ran for the street. I decided not to take the fast route home because from the building they'd be able to see me. I didn't want them knowing even the slightest direction I lived in. If they were really following me, the building was at the end of a street, so instead of going straight up the hill the way I initially came from, I turned right and started jogging. I kept glancing back, and finally I saw them about a block behind, following me. The street I needed, Stanley Street, was across the intersection on my left, about another block ahead, at a 4-way light. As I approached the intersection, I noticed the corner house on my right. There was an older man sitting on his porch smoking. I recognized him. He was another dealer I'd met only once a few weeks before when my usual guy was dry. I choked up as I got to his porch and asked if he remembered me. He did, and asked what's wrong. I quietly told him I think these 2 guys are following me, and asked if I could go inside for a minute until they passed. He didn't hesitate. We went inside, past his front living room, and into the kitchen, where I explained what happened. He told me not to worry, that I was safe there, and I could stay as long as I needed to. Then we heard a knock at the door, and I started to panic. He went to the door, looked through the peephole, and yelled, "Just a minute." He came back quickly and whispered that he knew the guys and was going to invite them in to have a hit. He told me to sneak out through his back door, which was beyond the kitchen, go to the right of the yard, and find the gate. This would lead to a side street. He instructed me to creep up along the side of his house, close to the shrubs, and check the porch to make sure they went inside. I followed his plan, and when the coast was clear, I didn't jog. I sprinted up Stanley Street and zigzagged all the way home. When I think back now, I'm in disbelief at my actions and how foolish I was. I thought I was invincible. I was far too trusting, but I thank God for the man who helped me that night. I don't know what those 2 guys wanted from me, but I'm forever grateful I never had to find out. So back in 2010, I lived in a real dive of a place with 4 other guys. It was a triplex. The owner had converted into one house. The place was just short of being condemned, but we were all in our 20s and wanted a party house, so it totally worked for us. We threw so many parties that we just didn't notice a lot of stuff, like when the spare bedroom window was smashed. We assumed one of our drunk friends did it by accident. Anytime food went missing, obviously one of our drunk idiot roommates just stole it, even though no one ever fessed up to it. We also had a ridiculous problem with what we assumed were raccoons all the damn time. We'd hear scratching and shuffling up on the roof. Every morning we'd go out and our trash would be all over the place. Well, after about a year of random messes, missing food and alcohol, and eerie scratches, one of my roommates and I were leaving the house at the same time for work. As we step outside, there is a familiar woman in our front yard. We've seen her a few times wandering the streets in the neighborhood, but never really paid her any attention. She's wearing one of my t-shirts and going through our trash can, tossing things on the ground. She isn't interested in my roommate, and I both freeze as we see the Woman doing this, and she very slowly looks up at us. Her eyes are totally glassed over, and she is at us with confusion all over her face. My eyes go wide as I recognize my t-shirt, and I go to open my mouth when she says something that to this day has made me shudder. Why are you living in my house? And that was all I could handle. I assure you, I am not someone that is ever short on words, but this rendered me entirely speechless. My roommate and I stared at each other eyes wide. We got into our cars and drove the hell away from our own home just to get away from that situation. That night, when we had all the boys together, we told them what had happened, and we made the decision to finally investigate the roof. Turns out we had a flat roof. It's not generally the kind of thing you think about. Most roofs are slanted or have angled. Not ours. It was just a flat roof, like a two-story building got cut in half. You just couldn't see the top because it had awning that blocked the flat roof from the view around it. So for the first time, we climbed up there and discovered someone had been living on our roof. Many of our missing things were strewn all over. It was a makeshift bed, spare clothing, food, WERS, water, and even books, all just sitting there. We moved out shortly after that, but I have never forgotten the look of that lady staring through me and asking what I was doing living in her house. I got a report of the missing husband. He told his wife and family of 6 children that he was going to get his tires changed, but he never returned. And this was 12 hours ago. They had purchased another house in a neighboring community, and the relationship with the wife was under pressure, so the wife assumed he was staying at the other house and claimed he would never end himself. The strange thing about this report, though, was that he emptied his personal bank account into his wife's this morning as well. The wife explained this off, saying that they recently had a fight about finances, and he agreed that he was bad at money and maybe they should have a joint account that she controls. On a hunch, I asked his 14-year-old boy if there are any areas in the mountains nearby that his father enjoyed going, and the son identified a road about 10 m away. It was nearing midnight, but I decided to drive to the top of this old and abandoned Forest Service road. As I drove through the snow and started to climb the road, I felt a gut feeling that I would 100% find this guy up there, either thinking about or already have ended himself. The snow-late gravel road had some sign of travel, but no real indication of how fresh the vehicle tracks could be. As I reached the top of the road after an hour of travel, I was honestly surprised that I did not find his black truck. I spent the drive back down thinking about gut feelings and how they are unreliable, but that I somehow felt different about this one. As I traveled up the road, I did notice over a dozen smaller roads branching off, but they were not mapped, and I'd already spent too much time on a single occurrence in a busy city with too few police officers. Nonetheless, I decided to check a single of these secondary roads, and about 3/4 of the way down, I picked a road at random to check, and sure enough, my headlights lit up the back end of a black truck about 100 yards past the first corner. Even if I hadn't memorized the license plate beforehand, I wouldn't have had to run it. It was clearly his. I radioed that I'd found the truck parked my vehicle and traveled the 20 feet to his truck with my heart beating like I was doing it at a sprint rather than a normal walk. What I found inside was a mess of brains and blood caused by a self-inflicted shotgun wound under the chin. I will save you from the description. There was just something about that gut feeling while traveling this abandoned in quiet mountain road, followed by a sense of being tricked by that gut feeling, then finding out it was true by discovering such a gruesome scene, having to wait 3 hours next to his truck waiting for body removal, and then to end it all by having to go to the family who was expecting good news to deliver them the worst news possible. That makes me feel creeped out to this day. This happened yesterday after I finished the night shift at around 3 a.m. I work at a store of a big fast food chain. To pay for my university, our staff changes frequently because of a lot of students and migrants working at our place, so you don't get to know each other very well. Everybody has their own social life, and it is very, very rare for co-workers to establish friendships outside working hours. Still, you know the people on your ship, and the night shift has particularly few workers. One of my co-workers, Jessier, started to get interested in me. Not that I noticed I am young and dumb like being friendly and important for later having a hard time saying no. In December 2019, our store threw a Christmas party at a pub. I went and had a great time, but I also made plans for later that night. Because of that, I wanted to leave early, which Made Jessier also want to leave early despite the fact he neither needed nor planned it beforehand, which made me uncomfortable. Unfortunately, he didn't know how to get to the train station, and I did, so I couldn't say no, and I just let him tag along. When we arrived at the train station, it came to light there was no train he could take to get home. None. He did not check beforehand, he did not ask me, he just wanted to tag along. With me really uncomfortable, instead of taking the train to the main station, he got into my train and only got out when I insisted he changes trains at another big station. But oh boy, that was not the train of the title. In January 2020, Jessier asked me out for coffee, and I agreed. I thought he just wants friends, he doesn't have any, and can only rely on his co-workers. If something happens, I can just nope out, and so I went. First it was okay-ish, we mostly talked about work-related stuff because we don't share any hobbies, we're not the same age, and we don't share the same mother tongue. Jessier didn't like talking about work and nothing more. He started talking about how different I was from the other workers, how nice of a person I am, how good my charisma is. Then he asked if we could go get to know each other better. I genuinely didn't want to, and still don't. Jessier is not my type, neither is a person, nor from his looks, especially his looks, even if I sound superficial. While I'm in my early 20s, Jazzer is at least in his early 30s. I have no problem with age gaps, a story for another subreddit, but I am not attracted to men that dress like teenagers. Instead of telling Jer a straight no, I told him I was not interested in having a boyfriend. He didn't take that seriously and told me I would change my mind. I told him I wouldn't. He again was not really on board with that opinion, so I elaborated my opinion 3 times in German and 1 time in English to make it very clear. He always changes to English if he does not get something or thinks he's misunderstood, even if he heard it clearly and just does not like it. I mean, obviously my opinion is going to change if I explain it in English rather than German. We left the conversation with him still not convinced, and me being really not interested in a second meeting. He quit soon after, and I foolishly assumed I was free, but whenever he came to my workplace to place an order, he would ask me out to get something to eat, and every time I would postpone whatever I'd said the last time because of finals, because of travel, because of anything I could get my hands on. Then came the pandemic that hit Germany in March, and I didn't see him anymore. I blocked him on social media in April and hoped that was the last thing to happen, but oh boy, that was not the case. Today I finished my shift at 3 a.m. and left with my female Asian co-worker way to catch the next train. We take different trains, so we decided to wait in the main lobby until I need to go to my platform. In that time, Jessier appeared. He just finished his shift and was on his way home. We asked him which train he needed to get, and he said he was walking home. While the conversation went on, I got closer to way to get some space between Jer and I. We did not grasp how uncomfortable I was in this situation, and she just walked away. What did Jer do? Well, he placed himself between we and I, right in my line of vision. Every fiber in my body felt he barged into my personal space. I decided I could not take a private conversation with him and said, "Oh look, I need to get to my platform to end it," but Jer followed me through the main lobby, through the train station, into the elevator and onto the train. I was internally screaming and walked through the train until I saw another passenger. I sat down in the row of seats next to me, and Jessier followed as if every bit of luck had just left me. The other passenger moved seats, so I was back to being alone. Jessier talked, and I showed clear signs of not wanting to continue the conversation. I hoped he would leave before the train departed, but he didn't. Mind you, the train goes in the opposite direction of his house, and it's a 1-hour walking distance to my workplace. There's no way in hell this man could get anything out of taking that train except following me and continuing the conversation. I was freaked out and told him in English he was acting very weird. Maybe I should have used a different word, but English is not my first language, and at that point my only thoughts were about escaping. I could not let him see my station, or he could easily find out where I lived. I don't live rural, but at 3 a.m. there's nobody on the streets, so him following me home was terrifying. I thought about getting off a station earlier, but then I would need to get a cab, for which I did not have cash on me, or that would mean I needed to walk the rest of the way, and he could still follow. I decided to get up at the next station, let him get off the train first, and then just stay inside while the doors closed. It fortunately worked, but only After telling him clearly this was not my station, I would not get out, and he would not get back in. I even held my hand out to stop him from coming back. He stayed outside after the conductor shouted at us to let the door close. So let's rewind. He was way older than me, but does not get the concept of me not wanting to be in a relationship with him, at least whenever he does not like an answer he switches to English because it just might be a misunderstanding. He followed me 2 times onto my train and almost to my home without even thinking about how creepy that behavior is. This is one of the most terrifying things that's ever happened to me. I'm a teenager and it's just my mom and I in the house with our 2 dogs. This is a story from last winter, but I'm posting it on here because it's starting to show up again, and my mom even started seeing it again as well. Last winter it was around, I want to say 12 a.m., and like I said, I'm a teen, so I'm awake at night a lot to doing my own stuff. I was by myself and I started hearing some banging in the kitchen, like cups falling and stuff like that, and this is not mine or my mom's first time with spirits speaking. I grew up in an extremely haunted home and it got so bad we had to move from it. I heard the cups and I'm usually not the person to investigate, but nothing weird had happened in a while, so paranormal activity didn't even cross my mind. I opened my door and peeked out into the hallway and I see what looks to be my mom standing in the corner of the kitchen. I could only see the back of her, but what was strange is that she was naked. This looked exactly like my mom. It had her body figure, her hair, her sun tattoo above her tailbone, and everything. Obviously, I was thinking, why is my mom standing naked in our kitchen at 12 o'clock in the morning like now? And this person, or whatever it was so visible that I literally thought it was my mom. It was stood there for a good amount of time, not moving at all. It was one of the worst encounters in my life. It still freaks me out. It wasn't shadowy at all. It was the most visible thing I'd ever seen, and all the lights in the kitchen and living room were on as well. Thinking it was my mom, I just said the word mom, confused on what she was doing, and I swear to you, from my mom's bedroom next to me, that's right across from my room, I heard my mom's voice say what from her room with her door cracked. The last thing I saw before I launched into my mom's room was the figure turning around. I didn't see its face or anything because I bought it so fast into my mom's room, freaking out so bad. I'm usually used to seeing that freaky stuff because, like I said, I grew up in an old house, but this was just so different. I was bawling in tears, freaking out. My mom got a crowbar or something from under her bed and went out to see if anything was there, and the figure I saw was gone. I slept in my mom's bed that night. Now this is where my mom's story comes in. About 2 days later, I was still so freaked out by what happened. I was still sleeping in my mom's bed. She's still freaked out by this story and doesn't ever like to talk about it, but she did tell me once it happened. It freaked her out so bad. She said she woke up in the middle of the night and her bedroom door was cracked and the hallway light was shining in her room a bit, which was strange because she shuts the door every night. This is where it gets really terrifying. She then says that she looked over on my side of the bed and on her left and saw what looked exactly like her again, naked. It crawled into bed with us on my side on the edge. My mom couldn't move and said it felt so real. It was facing the opposite side of her, towards the wall, laying on its side, and she couldn't see its face yet. She said she could move her hand and she was trying to shake me awake in tears, but I wouldn't budge. She doesn't remember anything that happened after that, but she was scared out of her mind all day once she woke up. When I first heard this, I thought sleep paralysis, but still scary as hell that she saw exactly what I had seen a few nights before. Looking so real. Sometime after that, we would swear that we would see her for a split 2 to 3 seconds standing in random places in the house, usually in her doorway or in her room. Whatever the thing is, it doesn't wear any clothes. We hadn't seen it since the last winter, but now it's back, and I don't know if it has anything to do with it being around Christmas, because that's where weird stuff started happening. Where we used to live, it would start around October and then would get worse around Christmas, but we hadn't seen this lady at our old home. My mom thinks that maybe it's her fault because when she was in her 20s in college, she did a Ouija board with a couple college friends and had a terrifying experience where it had a connection with her. Let's just say it got so bad the word "so" on the board wouldn't burn in the end, and all her friends who did it still have weird stuff happening to them. But I'm not going to get into her story. I'm making this post because yesterday morning my mom and I heard scratching on our carpet from the hallway when we were the only ones home. and our 2 dogs were sitting in their beds 2 feet away from us that same morning. My mom proceeds to tell me that she saw the naked lady again, but only for a split second because she swears that it looked like her. I'm just terrified that I'm going to run into her any minute at night again. So what do you guys think it is? Surprisingly, this is one of those stories I forgot about until a few days ago when I was talking to a school friend on call and I got reminded of this. She was pretty freaked when I told her and I got recommended to put it here, so here I am. This happened when I was roughly maybe 7 or 8, so some of the details are fuzzy, but I remember it pretty vividly. This may seem like unimportant context, but my family had just moved to America and we're renting the top portion of your regular suburban house in a pretty safe cold Zach. I had friends, they were triplets about 3 or 4 houses down. They weren't that far at all. Every day I go hang out with them, and around 9 or 10 in the night my older brother, who was around 11 or 12 I'd say, would make the 2-minute walk and come get me and walk me home. Since I was pretty young, one night he came to get me. As usual, the sun wasn't fully down, but it was getting pretty dark. We started down the walk as normal. When he started casting glances over his shoulder, I didn't really notice until he shoved me hard away from the sidewalk and in between 2 houses. Each house had a huge fence that separated their backyard. Noter though, and he made me crouch behind the fence. I remember being really scared, but more so confused, since I had no damn idea what the hell was going on. More specifically, he was a pretty big prankster. Once he convinced me my older sister crashed her car into the ocean, so I didn't really believe him when he turned and said walk behind the houses. I think someone's following us. Looking back now, he was probably trying to keep calm. However, whatever calm was left in my tiny 8-year-old body was gone the moment I turned around and looked. The man had followed us behind the houses, and he was just by the edge of a few houses down near a different fence line. He had a black hoodie on with the hood up, black sweatpants, and white sneakers. I have pretty bad eyesight now due to some health problems, but back then it was crystal clear and I could see with horrifying clarity that his jaw was hung open. It was like he was just standing there with his jaw hung open. It was horrifying. I think now that I'm older, maybe he had some kind of medical condition that affected his jaw, or maybe he did crack. I don't know, but back then I could have sworn to God that I was seeing some kind of demon. Anyway, my brother, when he saw me looking and getting ready to freak out, told me to just run as fast as I can to our house. We booked it. Neither of us looked back, but we were scared out of our minds. Like I said, we only rented the top portion of our house, so the bottom with the sliding door in the backyard belonged to some other tenant. I don't remember if she was home or not, but I remember tugging that thing open and locking it as fast as I could, and when I looked up, he was there in the yard a little ways away from the door, staring at us. My brother and I told my sister and mother immediately. My father was away on a work trip, but nothing came of it, not until the day after we went to go meet my dad at his warehouse, which had a small living portion above it, where we lazed around until he was ready to head home with us around dusk. He came up and told us we might have to wait since the police were here. He walked us around to the back window of the small area to show us police all around the backyard area of the warehouses. There were a few in a line to a white van parked on the grass by the edge of the woods. Like I said, I was pretty young then, so I don't remember many details of what actually happened, but I do remember my dad, who hadn't been told about the day prior, telling us they found a man and a woman in the van. The man, he said, had his mouth hung wide open. He seemed really disturbed too, telling me about the whole thing and wouldn't answer any more questions about the woman. Maybe she was dead. I've got zero idea. I do know they were arrested on trespassing charges. I don't know anything else, and I haven't asked about it. I doubt he'd remember. It's been over a decade and he's pushing 70, but it freaks me out to this day. I still can't believe it happened, and I don't have any answers for it. I talked to my brother briefly about it in hopes he remembered more than I do, but all I got was a long tirade about whatever medical condition the guy probably had for his mouth to be like that. My brother is an annoyed medical student now. Sometimes I think maybe he didn't mean any harm, was just drugged out of his mind, but this was like in the world's safest neighborhood, and it doesn't explain why or how he showed up at my dad's workplace. This happened over a decade ago when I was 12 years old. I live in a small town and in Oklahoma, and in my neighborhood the houses are fairly spread apart, separated by woods. It was a School day, so my grandma picked me up from school and brought me home. This was the first year that I got dropped off at my house alone. Before this, I would just go to my grandma's house after school. I would get dropped off at around 3 p.m. and my parents would be home around 4:30. Not that big of a deal today for some reason. My dad wasn't going to be home until around 7 o'clock and my mom, a teacher, wouldn't be home until around 8 p.m. because she had parent-teacher conferences at the school. This happened in early fall, so it wouldn't even be dark until like 8:30 p.m. I did what I usually did when I got home. I ran upstairs, got on my Xbox 360 and played Minecraft with my friends. Today it was just my friend and I was playing for about 2 hours when I heard a car door shut in my driveway. No one should have been here until like 7 p.m. My house is set up to where my upstairs has windows that look over my driveway, so with my mic on and controller in hand I went to the window to see who it was. Maybe my dad got home earlier than I expected. I looked outside. It was a red truck. No one I know drives a red truck. The person pulled into the middle of my driveway sideways, kind of like he owned the place. When I looked out the window, I saw a man with a hat wearing a big camo hoodie and jeans. It was September, so no one should have been wearing a big hoodie and jeans in Oklahoma. By the time I looked, he was already almost out of view. Going up my walkway to my front door, I thought maybe it was one of my dad's friends or someone my dad hired to do something, but he would usually tell me if someone was going to be coming over soon. After, I hear a knock at the door, then another, and I go to my other window that has a better view of the walkway to my front door. I see the guy walking back down the walkway. I switch and go back to looking through the windows overlooking my driveway. I'm relaying all of this to Seth, still with my mic on. I tell Seth that he's walking back to his truck now. Instead, he walks past his truck and tries to open like a rush side door. At this point, my heart sinks. I tell Seth that this guy just tried to get into my house. Mind you, it's already broad day, like 5 p.m. Luckily, it was locked, but we do sometimes forget to lock it after he tried the door. He starts walking to my back patio. I drop my headset and I quietly run down the stairs to see what he's doing. I get downstairs and stand between the walls so I'm not visible from the back door or living room windows. I stand there and listen. I hear him try to open the door, then I hear a thud. It sounded like he dropped a brick on the ground or something. At this point, I'm more scared than I've ever been. I wanted to call my parents or grandma, but I didn't have a cell phone yet. The only phone in the house was in my kitchen. I would have to cross my living room to get there, and he would be able to see me if I went into there. A few seconds after the thud, I peeked around the corner and he was gone. I run back upstairs and put my headset back on, telling Seth that he had just tried to open the back door as well as I'm telling him this. I hear a car door shut this time. When I look out the window, he had finally gotten into his truck. I looked at the truck closer and I noticed the only thing he has in his truck bed was a crowbar and a shovel. He sat in his truck for what felt like a few minutes. During this time, Seth told me to get my iPod and take a picture of his license plate. He was parked to where I couldn't see it. Then he drove backwards out of my driveway and down the road. A few minutes after he was confirmed gone, I went downstairs to see what the teach could have been. I get to the back door and see that the doormat was moved. Both big plant pots had been moved as well. He was looking for a key. Holy under. We do have a hidden key back there too. The key to the back door was under one of the smaller plant pots on a ledge near the door, not the biggest one that he had checked under. I went to the front porch and all of the other pots looked like they'd been moved as well. I don't know what I would have done if he was able to find the key or if he just broke in after he left. I called my dad and told him what had happened. When my dad got home, he had a cop come over and I told him what happened. I gave the cop a description. That guy never came back. So this happened to me about 2 years ago when I was 20. I was doing some shopping in town alone. I still remember that it was a warm Sunday afternoon. People were out with families and it was quite busy in the city center. I had some free time, so I decided on paying my grandma a visit. To get to her place, you need to take a 20-minute bus ride from where I was. So to the story, I was waiting for my bus and I noticed this man staring at me. He wasn't much older than I was, and I still remember he had on a bright yellow hat. I usually don't care when someone looks at me. This man was staring at me with a sort of anger, kind of like I'd done something to him. Most people at the bus stop were either facing the traffic or looking at the coming buses, but not him. He had his back to the traffic and was just staring at I had a weird feeling about him, but I saw my bus coming and just hoped he wouldn't get on it, except he did. I quickly sat in a window seat, and luckily for me, this old lady sat next to me. This old lady was like a shield between the guy and I. He stood next to our seat, almost to the whole room ride, except for pacing around oddly a couple of times. I was already quite freaked out and was texting my boyfriend at the time. Throughout it, while he hadn't actually done anything to me, I just had a really bad gut feeling. A few stops before mine, the old lady sadly got off the bus. The guy's behavior became even weirder. He sat next to me, which made me completely tense up. I refused to even look at my phone or text anyone in case he saw anything he could use to look me up later. I think he sensed me tensing up, so he got up and went back to either standing next to my seat or pacing around the bus. My stop came, and I waited until the last moment to get off the bus. Sadly, he also managed to get off the bus. What followed confirmed that he was indeed after me, I guess in an attempt to put me off again. He ran ahead of me on the road and kept glancing back. Him doing so actually gave me the only out from the situation. You see, if he would have kept walking behind me, I would have been forced to either make a run for the apartment door and hope I was fast enough to close the door before he got there, or be run in another direction and just hope I would have reached any place safely before him. I was out of the city center now, and there weren't many people around either to help me, so in that split moment I decided to turn around, walk in the other direction, and dial my mom. It's pretty bad, but I decided to call my mom in case anything happens to me, so she would know who it was. I told my mom what happened, and she told me to make a run for it. Down the road there was a small burger place. It would have a security guard. She told me to run for it and just tell them what was going on, so I did. I glanced back and saw the guy running after me, which almost made me cry. Luckily, I reached the burger place before he caught me from the window. I saw him crossing the road. I guess him seeing me get into the burger place threw him off. I have no idea why he fixated on me or what his plans were. If he did catch me, I'm not sure I even want to know. I'm a 16-year-old male. It was 9 or 10 p.m. and I was skateboarding at a skate park around 5 minutes away from my house. I don't have a car yet, so I usually skate there. Usually I do have to deal with some creepy or strange people because I live in Las Vegas, Nevada, in a not great part of town, so that's usually a common thing here. This night I went alone, and there was only one other person at the park who I'd met there for the first time. We had a good time and skated around for an hour, just him and I. Eventually the guy with a child came walking into the skate park, and he came up to us. The first weird thing that I noticed was that the child had no shoes and was wearing pants and a t-shirt, even though it was pretty cold outside, even for me, with a hoodie on. Another thing that was strange was he had what seemed to be a gun with him. I noticed the guy had some tattoos and was around maybe 6'. This guy starts first by talking to the guy I was skating with and tells him that he cuts hair and if he ever needs a barber to hit him up. My friend says thanks, and he walks over to me and says the same thing. I just say, "Oh, all right, thank you," and thought he would leave, but no, he asks if his son can try my board. I was a bit hesitant at first, but I said all right. The child didn't seem to even want to try it. The man had to pick him up by his arms and put him on it. Eventually the child stands on it and is trying it. While he is doing that, the guy turns to me and repeats himself, saying he's a barber and that he's just here with his nephew. I thought it was really weird that he said it was his son at first, and now he's saying nephew, skipping like 10 minutes. My friend leaves me there, and the guy is still there. He asks me to do a trick for his nephew, and while I'm doing it, forces him to watch me by holding his head in place towards me. After I do it, he repeats himself again, saying that he's a barber, if I ever needed a cut, and that he's here with his son. I then ask, "Didn't you say he was your nephew?" To which he says, "Oh yeah, sorry, I get confused sometimes. My bad." I just shrug it off and tell him I need to go. He then says, "Yeah, his dad's coming to pick us up now," so I'm leaving, and I look back and he is getting into a car. I'm not actually going home yet. I was just skating to McDonald's to have something to eat. I then see the car drive off, but instead of going the opposite direction, he goes the same way I'm going to the same McDonald's. He comes up to me again and says, "Hey, what a coincidence, I was hungry too," or something like that. At that point I just leave, but not be before he repeats himself again and then asks for my phone number, but I say no thanks. It's really weird, a guy just wandering around like that. If anyone has any theories or anything as to what was going on with him, and this kid I am interested in hearing. When I was 18 years old, I had major chest surgery due to an incident I had while being in the army. I awoke after surgery only to realize I was not actually awake. I woke up to utter darkness. I could hear the voices around me talking about me, praying I was going to get better, but the voices got quieter, and the darkness diminished. A light started to appear. The light was no ordinary hospital light lamp, the sun, or anything like that. The light was so bright, yet I couldn't look away. I felt it getting closer and closer, and then I heard a voice. It was my mother's. She was talking about me, talking about how I was crying. Then I felt it. The light was right there. If I would have stuck my hand out, I could have touched it. I could feel myself sobbing over what I was seeing, but I was unable to do anything. After a couple of minutes staring into the light, I finally found the courage to reach out to it, but when I went to grab it, I found myself waking up in my hospital bed with everyone's eyes focused on me. Now, I am not a religious man by any means, so I have considered the option of my dream happening due to the anesthetic, but this did not feel like a dream. It felt too real. I still see the darkness to this day. I'm a 25-year-old female. I work overnight at a store. I'm a stalker. When I first started, the guy around my age got hired to a couple months after me. He started hanging around another coworker and I on break, and we eventually became friends, even hanging out alone on breaks. Sometimes he seemed pretty normal at first, agreeable and a good conversationalist. He told me he was autistic, which I think helped me make excuses for him a bit. In hindsight, I was in a bad place mentally at the time, and having someone validate me felt nice at first, but then he started getting touchy. I would eventually be telling him more personal stuff, and he would start to rub my back. I didn't want to be rude at first, so I didn't say anything, but then he did it more often. I told him to stop, and he seemed to be sorry until doing it again. Eventually, I was alone with him during all these incidents, and the look on his face when he did eventually showed predatory vibes, and not like the friend I thought I had. Around the time he started doing this, he also confessed to me something he did in the past to a friend of his. You can probably guess what. It's along the lines of he acted quite remorseful and said him and the friend are civil now, and that it was a long time ago. I think he also cried a bit. I'm generally a compassionate person who believes in second chances, so while this is when more red flags started going off, I still hung out with him a bit, although more distantly. It didn't help that his general demeanor is one of a pitiful person. Nice act. He hung out with my boyfriend and I a couple of times. He lives near us, so we were kind of excited to have someone to hang out with at first, but he just kept getting weirder and weirder. The few times we hung out, he always seemed to be trying to subtly up my boyfriend in a sarcastic manner. There was also a strange time when he did a deep belly laugh at an explicit sexual song playing on his car radio.